listen to Arvo Pärt for a beautiful few minutes of the Psalm 131 in Old Church Slavonic, and then we will play out with another Arvo Pärt piece. And Darina has offered to stay after the play out for those who want to stay to talk to us a little about Old Church Slavonic, this strange language that is a liturgical language and not a spoken language. But let's calm ourselves with a little beautiful, beautiful Arvo Pärt first.
Spectacular. Thank you for that. All right, friends, we go back to our Psalm 17. I'm going to try today to finish our first run through of it. It's not your first run through since you did do it in Charuta. So I'm going to use a little bit of altar today because the Hebrew is and you'll see there's it's a complicated, some of the Hebrew phrases are very strange, but so I'm going to be using a little bit of alter as we look at the Hebrew and move through. I think we finished verse 4 or 5 yesterday.
Yes, hold on a second. I'm going to pull it up.
And we could do the Safaria. I'll just be referring so that people can see the Hebrew.
Okay.
I wish Alter had the Hebrew on the page. He does not. So I'm just going to be referring to Alter, but let's look at the Hebrew, because otherwise we will lose track.
Yes, I'm opening it. Hold on just a second. Somewhere. Give me a... Huh.
Yeah, I think, yeah, we finished 5. So we're up to 6.
All right. We should have it now.
And I don't know if when you were doing Chavrut, if you saw some of the architecture of the Psalm itself. The beginning part of the Psalm is quite different than the section we will hit soon, but this part I would call all part of the beginning, where the author, the speaker, is speaking of their relationship with the Holy One, right? That's pretty much what we're seeing in different kinds of ways, some more understandable than others. So I think we're up to 6, right? Did we do 6? Yes. So Ani karaticha, I call on you. Kara, I am calling on you. Ani is I, call on you. Cha, ki ta'aneni, you will answer me. This is the verb to answer. Het oznecha. We have again the word ozen for ear. Again, as Yael said, lots of body parts, but here the sen, turn your ear is, listen to me. And then we see the parallelism, turn your ear to listen to me. And then shema, hear, listen. Imrati, what I am saying. Lemor is to speak. So hear the what I am saying. So we're having a lot of repetitious but poetic differences that are fun to explore about the author, the psalmist, the speaker, appealing to God to be heard, to be seen, to be understood. Display your faithfulness in righteous deeds. So this is an interesting, so this is we're on verse 7. Okay, I have to, it's too small for me. I'm going to read from my book. Hafle chasadecha, Moshia chosim. So hafle, to set aside or to lahafli, to move aside, chasdecha, chesed shelcha. So in that word, so chesed, chet, samech, dayan, the biggest word that has many, many, many understandings. So chesed can mean loving kindness. Somebody who is Baal Chesed. It's very interesting. In Judaism, we talk about people who are, if they embody the certain characteristics of somebody who acts in ways of loving kindness, we would call them a Baal Chesed. Somebody who embodies these acts of kindness. Doesn't have to be an intellectual, doesn't have to be a super smart person, doesn't have to be, but we understand somebody who embodies the characteristics of somebody whose primary concern in life is to extend, to spread, to exemplify godliness through chesed, through loving kindness, is called a Baal Chesed, a person who embodies chesed. Chesed could also mean some kind of loyalty. It has a feeling of loyalty to it. So a chassid that we talk about, chassidim, are followers, somebody who is attached to or either implicitly or explicitly expresses fealty. There's a sense of, so this word, while it means chesed, also means a follower. It can mean like a, not in the verb form, but a chassid, or like chassidim are followers or they have loyalty to. But in this case, chassid, and there are ways that it can be the way that they've translated it here as faithfulness. is an interesting little bit of reflecting the second definition a little bit more than the first. This is an example of different commentators and different translators explore what does the chasdecha mean, and which is exactly why. Shep, could you please rate yourself? It's really disturbing to see that. You surely have control over your screen. Thank you.
Sorry, there's no gravity in space.
Thank you. So the way that the word is used, that's one of the reasons I like this run through that's fairly slow, but looking at is to point out where there are some problematics or some things that are open to a range of response. If we only look at one person's translation, you just kind of accept that word. But what I want you to be able to do is after we've gone through, when we look at how different translators or commentators or poets deal with it, you'll understand a little bit more of the struggle they've had to come up with their understanding of what the word means. So here, the Safari is saying faithfulness, and altar. This is 7, right? God, everybody writes so small. Maybe I really need better reading glasses, huh? He uses the word mercy. So altar is going more with that first meaning of kindness, mercy, loving kindness, and faithfulness is a little bit more on the chassid category, the loyalty, faithful, etc. Moshiach, chosim. Moshiach again is a delivery, redemption, back to that word that is used by Christians and very powerful for Christians whenever they see this word in biblical Hebrew. We Jews don't have that response to it, but deliverance, redemption, saving, savior, etc., all those things. So you who deliver, and then this is where this is not an easy thing to understand. So the last word, be, which is in your, right? Yaminecha. Yamin is your right hand. And this is, by the way, might look familiar to some people, is the Hebrew name Benjamin. Binyamin is literally referring to Binyamin, from the right hand. So altar does with this second part of the sentence, rescuer of those who shelter from foes at your right hand. You who deliver with your right hand those who seek refuge from assailants. So in any way, which this is not an easy verse to translate, there's some continuing the sense that God will provide some kind of protection. And let's keep going to 8. By the way, verse 8 is very popular in Christian pop music. If you Google this, I'm sure you'll find, I was at a conference where there was a Christian pop, and I forgot what the conference was, but they guard me like the apple of your eye. And I think this might be even the phrase where this phrase is from. You'll see there's no word apple in the Hebrew. But this reading of this verse, so this is a very, very famous verse. As you can see what it means, in the Hebrew literally says something like daughter of your eye, but there's something about, I don't know why it's become apple. That'll be interesting to see if we can find an understanding of that. But guard me like, something so deep, something profound. Hide me, b'tzel knafecha. Tzel is a shadow, or the b'tzel knafecha, in the shadow of your wings. Tasti reni, hide me. Now, tasti reni is an important word because the shoresh of that word is the same shoresh of the word Esther. We're coming up to Purim, so this is a good word for Purim. The word for lahastir, or to hide, is the same root as the word Esther. The name Esther comes the word for hidden or hiding or not seen. So protect me like something, the apple of your eyes. Protect me like something you love very, very dearly, and hide me in the shadow of your wings. And this verse is used a lot to describe a sense of being protected and a sense of being comforted when one is afraid, of being what one asks for if you're fearful and scared, and to this kind of deep, deep, deep protection. Now the psalm switches or shifts, I shouldn't say switches. All of what we've had from verses up until 8 is really describing what we're asking, how we're asking to be protected in many different ways. In some ways, obviously, as I said, more clear, some ways less clear. But there's a sense from verses 1 through 8 that it's about being protected. Now we shift into what can be for some a very difficult part of the psalm, which is, what are we asking to be protected from? This goes back to what we've discussed since verse 1. How do we understand what enemies are or who evil people are? And we modern people are very discomforted. We discomfited. We don't like talking about evil. We don't like talking about evil people. We don't like talking about, and as I've said over and over again, and I'll keep repeating this, every psalm that talks about enemies or evil or danger can either be read or both, either and or both, as an internal, talking about internal enemies and or external enemies. And I think at different moments in our life and in our psychosocial political development, different things we'll respond to. And for sure, I heard from all of you, or some of you at least, that in the time of Trump, all of a sudden we started experiencing a sense of evil people in a way that we might not have been so comfortable before. And that's a way that Americans, I think, are really different than people who live in other parts of the world, where we often have been we're a little kumbaya and a little hard to call somebody evil or bad. And I'm not arguing one way or the other, but that's the challenge of the psalm. And I know if you imagine some of those people, try to think of some of the people you've seen as really the depths of depravity in this country and around the world. Could the psalm be referring to them? Can you then see it as external, or is it only about battling internal enemies? And boy, we all know what that's like. So the psalm shifts, and let's see this description of what we're asking for when we talk about wanting protection or help or strengthening or support. Okay, 9. Mipnei, from the face of, or from in front of, Rishaim. Remember, there are several different words for evil or bad people in biblical Hebrew. Rishaim is one of the basic ones. And Rasha is a bad person. And we hear that a lot when we talk about Haman in Purim. He's a Rasha. Rishaim, from in front of bad people, or in this case, the translator here says wicked. Zu, what about these bad people? Sheduni, who despoil, who steal from, who take from me. Another word for evil, oy, again, now here is the biblical parallelism. So we have Rishaim, who do X, Y, and Z. And then oiv, is it, what's the oivai? Oyev is an enemy. So the parallelism here for the two verses, Rishaim, first enemy or bad person, oivai, my enemies. So who encircle me. So clearly, so the wicked who take from me, despoil me, and my mortal enemies who encircle me. So in other words, this is an example of biblical parallelism of intensification. So one bad thing happens in the first half, and then the second bad thing is even worse. Okay, so somebody who takes from me, that's bad. But it's not a one-time event, this verse is saying. These bad people, these enemies then go on, not just take from me once and they're gone. I feel encircled by them. Lahakif, surrounded by, circled. 10. Kleinbaum sagru. Okay, so the shoresh there, if you look in the middle of, this is a very kind of a strange sentence. Kleinbaum sagru. It's often translated, and this is where Alter talks about. It's not really clear exactly how this means, but there's something about the fat that surrounds the heart. Pimo dibru vigaut. They speak arrogance. They speak excessive pride, one would say. Ge'ah, we talk about Kihila Hageah, proud synagogues, or communities, gay synagogue, but it is here, it's a sense of arrogance, not just pride. All right, 11. So, but notice that sentence is about language, right? So they're speaking language. Remember, we've talked about there are different degrees of evil. One is the ability to spread propaganda or speak evil or speak hate. And then another is acting on it. Ashreinu ata. Now here's an example where we don't know there's some scribal differences here on what's written and how it's pronounced. Now they hem in our feet all around us, surround us. Einehem, their eyes, roaming lintot ba'aretz, over all the land. So there's a sense of expansiveness, right? Now again, have we had acts of violence yet? There's a sense of impending, increased sense of threat. Okay, Domino, this is 12, Aryeh. An Aryeh, and some of you might know, it's a popular Aryeh. You might know people in a certain generation. That was a very popular name for boys, Aryeh, a lion. So now, and Litroph is to tear apart. Actually from the same shoresh as treif, but Litroph is to tear apart. So what is our enemy like? The psalmist is saying, like a lion eager for prey. In other words, just about ready to pounce. That feeling that we were under attack and it's about to happen. It's just a sense of doom that is so close. We're okay right now, but very shortly we're going to be destroyed. A king of beasts lying in wait. So that it's an additional sense of impending doom. Like, I think this is such a powerful image to feel doom, that you are exposed. What would it feel like to feel like there is a lion, enormous lion, who is hungry and ready to pounce, and you are the prey, and you can't run fast enough, you can't get out of there fast enough, and feels like there's no hope. Kuma Yud He Vav He, arise, get up, Yud He Vav He. So now the psalm shifts a little bit from that. So if the first 8 verses were one chunk, I'd say then 8 through 11 is this, or 8 through 12 is this other chunk. And then Kuma, arise, Yud He Vav He. Kadma, that's like Kadima, Keda, to go forward, move forward. Fanav, again, we see the repetition of this word or shoresh in different places through the psalm. For those of you who are following the Hebrew, in different ways, we've had milfanecha, lifnei, etc., etc. And now it's go forth to meet him. Go right out there. Go meet this doom, which is about to land on my head. You go out and help stop this. Palta, lahaflit is to rescue. This is also, a plita is a refugee. It's the word in Hebrew for refugees. And rescue me, rescue nafshi, my body, my soul. Merasha, here's the word for evil again, from the evil who has cherev. This is, the song, Lo Yisagoy El Goy Cherev. Cherev is a sword. So rescue me from those who are wicked with your sword. Cherev Shelcha. The changes in the grammar there are because it's a pausal form, but we'll leave that for now. Okay, 14. Metim yadcha. No, mimtim yadcha. I'm telling you, in the course of this class, my eyes have deteriorated. Yud he vav he. From men, oh, this is interesting. Oh Lord, from men whose share in life is fleeting. But as to your treasured ones, fill their bellies. Timale Vietnam. Beten is a belly. Fill their bellies. Is b'u vanim. The sons will be satisfied. Seva is to be satisfied. Their sons will be satisfied. V'hinichu, and have something to leave, something that will be yitram, left over, le'olalehem, for their young. It's a word for their young. Okay, and this continues. This is the, I believe this is still 14, right? The verse is, it's a very, no, this is, sometimes it's, mine has it marked as 15. So this is just incorrect there. Ani, I, b'tzedek, injustice, or here justified. Injustice, though, here's the word tzedek. Tzedek, if there is a word that's an antonym for Russia, for evil in Jewish biblical outlook, if Russia is on one end, tzedek is on the other. So here's a huge contrast. If I will feel this kind of protection that verses 9 through 14 have shown me, then I, b'tzedek, I will echezeh, I will see. Again, here's that shoresh, panecha, your face. There's a lot of theme in the Hebrew between your face, and that's the power of the word hester, to be hidden, but face, to be visible, to be in front of, to be seen. And esba'a behakitz tmunatecha. This is a very, very famous verse. And then I will be filled with this image or this vision of you. Tmuna is a picture. You know, we would use that now to talk about a picture, but a photograph or a picture of tmuna is an image or a reflection or a picture of you. All right. Let's pause now. We got through, fantastic. So you see the overview of the psalm, and I think you see hopefully now a little bit of the big architecture. And now let's have some responses or questions.
Dorothy Leyland.
Yes,
Even though most of the
on-
time he doesn't. He's so
on
lucky.
verse 12,
I tell him, you better start looking for a hotel room.
Allison, please mute yourself. Go ahead, Dorothy.
I just muted her.
verse
If you're
12,
gonna really, can I just pause? If you're gonna take
Sure.
telephone calls during the Psalms class, which I really prefer you don't do unless it's an emergency, please mute yourself. It's just rude. Thank you, Dorothy.
yes, line 12, as you were talking about, he is like a lion eager for prey, a king of beasts lying in wait. I started to think about anxiety and how what you were saying really can correspond to a person experiencing a lot of anxiety, especially I think in these times. I mean,
Yep.
with COVID, with what we were talking about before class, with
Yeah.
everything that's going on. So I would, my interpretation for that would be an internal
And
enemy.
I totally agree with that. I don't disagree that, and I find it very powerful. We all know what these internal demons are like. Absolutely. And I think anxiety is the idea of a crouching lion and you feel like you're about to be the victim of a starving lion that is just about to pounce. That's a pretty powerful image. And anxiety, certainly, we all know what that feels like.
Sarah Sloan.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Earlier in the psalm, we had the phrase "B'tzel knafecha tastireni."
Yes.
That felt very comforting, but it also felt like I knew very familiar.
Tell us all what verse it is in so people can follow.
I honestly don't remember. It was
Okay,
in
it's chet, 8.
Chet.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that first part or that phrase part of the regular tefillot? It seemed so familiar.
You know, I don't think so. We could look it up. I don't think so. The actually, you know what? I think it's part of bedtime Shema.
Okay, that makes sense.
I'm pretty sure that's in the bedtime Shema. But it's not part of like the regular prayers.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And and verse 2, I think, is in Rosh Hashanah services.
Lori Krotman?
So like Dorothy, I take most of these Psalms internal, the enemies. And the very last line, when I read, I justified, it made me think of, like print. When you justify print, it's not to the left, it's not to the right. It's centered. So I thought of that if I'm centered.
That is so creative. I mean, it would be a different word in Hebrew, but in English, for sure, that's similar. And that's so interesting. I've never thought of it that way.
Thank you.
Huh.
Sherry, our author with the new book, Sherry Dratfield.
A new book, a new granddaughter? Oh, no, it's Simon, though. It's Simon.
But actually, you get me this for the question. Returning to verse 8, you sort of skipped over quickly what the literal piece was that got translated as apple of your eye. But
Right.
what was the literal?
Literally, it's daughter of your eye.
And is that used somewhere else and have meanings elsewhere, in the Psalm or elsewhere in Scripture?
Can I respond to this?
Yeah, go ahead.
So
Yeah.
I don't think it's daughter of your eye. I think it's short for bavat ayin, which is the pupil of the eye.
Ah, there you go. So now how that became apple of the eye, I do not know. But maybe apple,
it's
maybe that's a
round.
pupil somewhere.
Okay, it's round. Maybe that's it. Okay, but thank you.
I want to see what.
Well, I looked up the Wikipedia article. Shakespeare talks about the apple of the eye, and then the King James translation picks it up, really just meaning pupil. Apple, pupil. It's a little unclear, but bat ayin and bava ayin does appear several other times in the Bible.
Yeah, and I'm looking at Levy has something as well. Yeah. But so apple maybe is just the shape, but yes, apple of the eye is definitely, and it's used in every Christian translation. This is a very, very famous, this verse of I am the apple of God's eye, that whole concept, very, very popular in Christian.
And Rabbi, I just happen to have the bedtime Shema here. And it's a similar verse, but it's from 91. It's who lives in the shelter of the Most High, dwells in the shadow of the Almighty. Yoshev B'Tseter Elyon B'Tzel Shaddai Yit Lunam. Not Psalm 17, but it's close.
I think Psalm 17 is there too, but we'll look later, but maybe not. Maybe it's just that I remember.
Saul Zalkin has his hand up.
So when I first read the verse about the lion, I thought that the psalmist was talking about God. God is waiting to pounce on the evil people. And then I realized whenever a lion is mentioned in Psalms, it's always the evil person. It's the people who are out to get me that are the lions. God is never mentioned as a lion in the Psalms as a protector. People have been posting in the chat about how Richard the Lionhearted, well, he was king and he was the protector of his nation. But I don't think that the psalmist ever thinks of a lion as the same as Hashem.
That is a great point. I don't know. We would have to really look.
Because in a previous psalm we studied was also an evil person.
Yes. Well, very interesting.
Michael Goldstein.
Yeah, hello. I just go back to verse 6. I call on you, you will answer me. God, turn your ear to me, hear what I say. To me, that's the hinge of the whole psalm. The first, before that, verses 1 through 5 are what the poet is asking for, and then after 6, it's asking for protection from these various things. Hear what I say and
Uh-huh,
try to help me.
uh-huh.
So it's just
Nice.
that hinge is what I saw.
Kenneth Carpel.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to the notion of this being about internal demons. In verse 3, talks about coming upon me by night, and in the last verse, it's about being awake. And we discussed this in our chavruta. It sounds like night terrors to me.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah,
one
sure does.
who's vulnerable to these fears, whether it's something internal or external. But it seems like a description of night times.
Well, who here could not relate to that, right? Anybody feel like that doesn't make sense to them? Certainly makes sense to me. Beautiful. And then you understand why the psalmist goes to a place of looking for, and that becomes the challenge to all of us. Okay, we can really respond to the description of fear and internal anxiety. And then the big challenge is, where do we turn for the comfort? How do we experience shelter? What would that look like?
Is it Alicia? Is it Alicia or Alicia?
It's both, which is annoying. My mom calls me Alicia because I'm half Puerto Rican, but both, I love both. So
All right, Alicia.
whatever's good for you is good for me. I just really love, I'm having a lot of resonance with the story of Ruth in this psalm. Particularly, I think the shelter and hesed and protection under a wing. And I just really love that, which you don't expect. And I know that I know those written much later, but there's just this kind of lovely and symbolism that I think
beautiful.
Especially then with the sensuality of Ruth, which I think makes sense for some of the sensuality of this psalm as well, of like, it's so body oriented. And the last verse is, I know Alter puts in there that it's a very sensual last verse, and it is quite a lot to say that you can behold the face of God and live.
Yeah, it is very much so. And thank you for that. And Alter actually says, and I don't know the poem myself, and maybe I'll, if I have time, today I won't, but to look it up, he says, Alter says, referring to that last verse, which I said is a very famous verse, the speaker has just invoked full bellies and sated sons, but now at the end it is God's image, not in a dream vision, but complete wakefulness, as Alicia is saying, that sates him. The sensual concreteness of this concluding clause is so striking that it led Yehuda Halevi, the great medieval Hebrew poet, to adopt it for a homoerotic poem in which the speaker awakes and sees his beloved friends faced by his side. So there you go. That's, so it goes into, so Yehuda Halevi, along with a few other medieval Hebrew poets, wrote very, very homoerotic poetry. We have an entire body of Hebrew and reflecting Arabic of the same period. Both Arab and Hebrew poetry of this period was homoerotic, male homoerotic. And Yehuda Halevi was one of them. One of the funniest things, though, is that if you study those poems, and I took a class, a one semester class in this medieval Hebrew poetry. It's very famous in the world of Hebrew poetry. But the degree to which the commentators go, because in Hebrew, as we know, you know when a man is speaking to a man, you know when the author is a man, and you know when he's speaking to a man. The degree that they go to explain that it wasn't really a man. So I'm just going to tell you this story. It's a great one about Yehuda Halevi. I don't remember this particular poem, but there's a very famous rabbinic commentary said that Yehuda Halevi was actually in love with a married woman. And because he couldn't confess his love to a married woman, meaning using female, forms, he used male forms to disguise the fact that he was in love with a married woman. As this is a very famous rabbinic commentary, as if Yehuda Halevi expressing male sexuality would have been better somehow than being in love with a married woman. It's really, anyway, so Yehuda HaLevi, so this is fantastic that this psalm is even used by Yehuda HaLevi to express male sensual love. So that's pretty fantastic.
Lisa Brown.
So I'm noticing that, this psalm is it says so many different things. So I mean, in verse 3, I have the Masorah here, the Art Scroll translation, and they translate this second part of verse 3 as my thoughts do not transgress the words of my mouth. So like he's thinking things but he's not saying things. And yet later he cries out to God, and God hears the author, hears them. That's one thing. And then the other thing is that the author is asking to be hidden the same way that the evil ones were hidden. So that's an interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
That's very interesting, Lisa.
Betsy Immershon.
I find in verse 8, shelter me in the shadow of your wings. It's also in liturgy and translation. And that to me, having it in the middle of the psalm brings so much, it kind of gives this push of comfort in the middle as we're struggling.
Yes.
And you ask the question, where do we find comfort?
Right.
And this is a phrase that I use all the time for myself. I have this image of actually being sheltered in the shadow of, and not physically God, but this sense of almost like this huge bird that kind of overarches everything, and to be in the shadow of that wing of godliness has been a comfort for me for years.
Beautiful.
So I
This is
love
a very
that.
powerful image that's found in a bunch of places, but I think this is the first time we're seeing it in Psalms, right? We haven't seen it yet.
I don't think we've seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Rabbi, that was the last hand up, and it is 10:42.
Yep.
If you wanted to make some final comments, and then we'll do a play out.
Yeah, so I think what I hope you get from this is the overarching structure and some of the challenges with the Hebrew. And now what we're going to start to do is look at, if you have Alter, do Alter on your own today, read through. He has a few interesting comments. I think the most interesting one is about Yehuda HaLevi and the use of this by Yehuda HaLevi, which makes me want to find the particular poem. And then today's Wednesday, right? Is today Wednesday? What day of the week is this? Wednesday, right. And then tomorrow we're going to start looking at the way some of our commentators and our interpreters address some of these things. Alter points out, which I like very much, that he starts with the word tefillah, prayer, says a prayer of David, and the psalm ends very much, it feels like, with a prayer, which is different than some of the things that we have felt also. Yes, and Joan, I agree with you. Awake, I am filled with the vision of you. Very powerful. Very, very powerful. I love this. Yeah. And I think this is an example of a psalm that every single line doesn't jump out at us. And it's not like Psalm 23, where there isn't a word that doesn't have resonance. There's some challenging, and in the Hebrew and the English translations, but overall, I find the architecture quite meaningful, and we'll keep looking at it for the next day or two. So Harold, do we have a time for people to start doing their personals? We can't hear you, Harold. Oops. Harold is muted. That never happens in my world.
No.
I don't know what I'll do, Harold, if you're
Rabbi,
muted.
you and I have to look at the schedule and have
Okay.
our negotiations, okay?
Right.
We haven't started in our parlay yet. So we're going to play Arvo Pärt Psalm 117. I'm going to try to show the text, and it is 3.5 minutes for those of you who want to stay. And afterwards, I've invited Darina to talk to us briefly about Old Slavonic. All right.
Fabulous.
Okay.
When is our translation due? You didn't answer that.
Michael, yes,
We'll
I
tell
said
you
we
tomorrow.
don't know yet. Okay.
We'll tell
We
you
will
tomorrow.
Okay. Now to the play out.
Hmm.
So there we
Wow,
are.
beautiful.
Beautiful, right? And Professor Ivanova, we turn it over to you to tell us a little bit Old Slavonic.
Well, what you heard is actually not the oldest possible version of the language. This is the so-called Russian version, which it is not purely Russian. It is based on very old Bulgarian, like late 9th century, and it still shows in the vocabulary. Well, Bulgarian maybe wasn't a clearly distinct language at the time. It's not very clear. It was still in the process of formation from the local Slavic dialects, I guess. And Slavic languages or dialects were still very similar at the time. So it wasn't a problem for Slavic people to understand one another so much as it is now. So the Russians took that language and they used it for centuries, and it underwent the very heavy Russian influence. The way the Russian language developed, especially phonetically. And in the meantime, Bulgarian developed in different directions. So now we have this strictly liturgical language that tried to make it the official language of Russia. It didn't work because the spoken language were developing in yet another way. And eventually whoever codified the official Russian language had to resign to that. And this language is now strictly liturgical in Russia. And there was a similar story in Bulgaria after we got liberated.
So Darina, this language, because we're going to have to go shortly. So this is a liturgical language. It's not a language that anyone speaks currently, correct?
Yes.
Certainly is. Does it sound as beautiful to you as it sounds to us?
Yes, it sounds very beautiful, but it's difficult to understand for both modern Bulgarians and modern Russians.
Okay.
The Russians complain from the Bulgarian vocabulary, and the Bulgarians complain from the Russian grammar.
Wow. All right. So is this what we would hear in a Russian Orthodox church?
Yes, and in the Bulgarian Orthodox Church too.
Okay.
There are slight differences in pronunciation, but it's basically the same, especially when they sing the psalms.
All right. Thank you so much for telling us a little bit about it. We appreciate your staying. Well, I never know exactly what time it is, but this is fascinating. All right.
What a fabulous class with so many people bringing so many interesting things to offer. Very much appreciated. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
By the way, tomorrow at 2:00, New York Jewish Agenda is doing a wonderful mayoral forum that Randy is moderating with most of the leaders in the mayor's race here in New York City. So I think we'll be putting something out on Facebook later today. Should be great. Tomorrow at 2.
I saw that note, Rabbi, and I thought for a minute, what if the snowstorm and they won't be able to make it? And I thought, oh, they're all at home. All right, everybody, we'll get
It's
back
happening.
tomorrow with the dates. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you, Darina.
All right, I'll go ahead and close the room. Have a good day, everyone.